Aston Martin's 2026 nightmare, or the most dangerous slow start in F1 history?
Let me paint you a picture. You hire the greatest car designer Formula One has ever seen. You write him one of the biggest checks in motorsport history, reportedly £30 million a year. You build a brand new factory from scratch, a state-of-the-art wind tunnel powered by one of the most advanced computing infrastructures on the planet, and you lock in a full works engine deal with Honda. You bring in Enrico Cardillo, the man who shaped Ferrari's recent renaissance, as your chief technical officer. On paper, 2026 was supposed to be Aston Martin's coronation. Instead, they showed up to the Barcelona shakedown 4 days late, in an all-black car, not as a dramatic style choice, but because, as Adrian Newey himself admitted, they simply ran out of time to paint it. Lance Stroll managed 5 laps before the car ground to a halt. 5. Then came Bahrain. More engine failures. A borescope shoved inside the Honda power unit on live television. Garage screens pulled shut. And a verdict from Lance Stroll that echoed across every paddock in the world. They were 4.5 seconds off the pace. Fernando Alonso's inner circle, according to Spanish commentator Antonio Lobato, delivered an even bleaker summary: another year in hell. So the obvious question is the 2026 Aston Martin season already finished before it began? Here's the truth. It's complicated. And once you understand the full picture, it becomes one of the most fascinating stories in modern Formula One. 3 crises, 1 car. What makes Aston Martin's situation so brutal is that this isn't one problem. It's 3 simultaneous crises colliding at once. The first and most visible is the Honda power unit. GPS telemetry data analyzed during testing revealed that Honda's engine alone is responsible for approximately 1.5 seconds of Aston Martin's deficit per lap. The AMR26 consistently failed to exceed 300 km per hour on Bahrain's main straight, while rivals were flying past that marker with ease. The engine was being held below 11,000 revolutions per minute for extended stretches. In Formula One terms, that's the equivalent of driving with the handbrake on. Why is Honda so far behind? When they withdrew from Formula One at the end of 2021 after powering Max Verstappen to his first world title, they dismantled significant portions of their engine development team at the Sakura facility. Engineers were reassigned. Programs were wound down. Then in late 2022, Honda reversed course and committed to 2026 as a full manufacturer. But by the time the formal partnership with Aston Martin was confirmed in May 2023, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull powertrains had enjoyed completely uninterrupted development cycles. Honda was starting from a blank sheet, with a skeleton crew, under the most radical engine regulations the sport has ever seen. Honda's own technical lead, Tetsushi Kambara, acknowledged that their previous high-speed combustion approach was essentially unusable under the new 2026 rules, requiring entirely new concepts. And critically, Honda only supplies one team, Aston Martin. Compare that to Mercedes, supplying 4 teams, or Ferrari with 3. More customer teams means more data, more real-world feedback flowing back to the factory every single weekend. Honda gets a fraction of that information. Every race week, that deficit compounds. The second crisis is the gearbox. For the first time ever, Aston Martin built their own gearbox instead of sourcing it from Mercedes. Reports from Spanish publication Marca indicate the unit suffers from severe vibrations under load. Engineers in the paddock have described it as fragile. And when Lance Stroll spun off at turn 11 during the second Bahrain test on February 18, Sky Sports analyst Anthony Davidson immediately said it was not driver error. The footage appeared to show Stroll losing drive mid-downshift. A gearbox failure. Experts estimate a full redesign could take 6 months. That potentially writes off the entire first half of the season. The third crisis is time. Newey joined Aston Martin in March 2025, 3 months after rivals were permitted to begin aerodynamic work on their 2026 cars. Their new CoreWeave wind tunnel wasn't operational until mid-April, meaning Aston Martin started their wind tunnel development program 4 full months behind every other team. As Newey himself said, that put us on the back foot by about 4 months, which has meant a very, very compressed research and design cycle. The car only came together at the last minute. 4 months in F1 development isn't just a delay. It's an entire concept validation phase, hundreds of wind tunnel runs, thousands of data points, Multiple aerodynamic philosophies tested, rejected, and refined. All of it lost. But here's what the stopwatch isn't showing. When you strip away the panic, something more interesting starts to emerge. Pedro de la Rosa, Aston Martin's performance director, described watching Newey lead the technical debrief after one of their worst days in Bahrain. His leadership is so strong that all the team knows exactly what they have to do. This is very different from previous years, where everyone would have their own theory about things. Adrian is very clear what has to be done, and no one raises the hand to question it. Therefore, you have this massive amount of resources working in one single direction. That is not a team in collapse. That is a team being restructured from the inside out. Think about what Newey is actually doing right now. He's not chasing lap times in February. He's eliminating ambiguity, identifying which of Aston Martin's processes are robust and which are fragile, and building a foundation so that when this car does start working, the development trajectory becomes relentless. That's exactly how early Red Bull operated. They didn't dominate instantly, but once the foundation was correct, each upgrade stacked efficiently, and their mid-season pace became ruthless. Newey has been explicit that the AMR26 was designed with long-term development potential in mind. What you want to try to avoid is a car that comes out quite optimized within its window but lacks development potential, he explained. He's building a skeleton, not a snapshot. And then there's Fernando Alonso. When he expresses confidence in the chassis while acknowledging uncertainty around the power unit, that's not spin. That's a surgical distinction from a man who has driven championship-winning Newey cars. He knows the difference between a fundamentally broken concept and one that simply hasn't unlocked yet. His frustration is directed at Honda. His faith in the architecture is intact. Juan Pablo Montoya has gone further, suggesting that what we've seen in Barcelona and Bahrain isn't the full picture, that Newey may be holding performance back for Melbourne, and the real AMR26 hasn't shown its face yet. It's a bold theory, but with someone who has pulled off mind games of this scale before, you can't completely dismiss it. The bigger picture. Lawrence Stroll has always described this as a 10-year project. The factory, the wind tunnel, the Honda partnership, Newey's arrival. These are structural investments, not short-term bets. The engine homologation deadline locks in Honda's core architecture on March 1st, just 1 week before Melbourne. But the FIA's catch-up provisions for underperforming manufacturers could open the door for meaningful Honda upgrades as year. LY is the Canadian Grand Prix in June. The comparison that keeps surfacing is McLaren in 2023, a team that started the season with a fundamentally flawed car, made a dramatic concept pivot mid-year, and turned themselves into genuine race winners by the second half. McLaren did it, and Aston Martin has significantly greater resources. Is the 2026 season already over for Aston Martin? Almost certainly as a championship battle. But is this a disaster, or the painful, unglamorous birth of something genuinely dangerous? The evidence points toward the latter. The foundation is being laid right now, lap by painful lap, in the Bahrain heat. If Newey gets this right, and his 30-year career gives you very little reason to bet against him, the teams currently celebrating their testing dominance might want to enjoy it while they can. Because once Aston Martin's correlation locks in, the pace of their development could shift very quickly. And in Formula One, the team that understands its car the deepest almost always wins in the end.